Hey guys, welcome back to Frank and F.O.E. You've tuned in to Speaking Your Truth, and today's episode is about setting healthy boundaries, what that looks like, why it's so important for people to invest in understanding what their boundaries are, why they need them, and who they need to apply them to in what situation. We've been speaking about really getting to know your authentic self, really understanding all facets of you. We've been talking about why it's so vital for you to dig deeper into yourself and understand who you are and what you want from life. A part of all of that is also understanding your limitations. It's also understanding how much of yourself you can give, how much you can receive, and where those boundaries start and stop for whatever predicament you're in. Whether it be your relationship with your partner, whether it be your relationship with your children, whether it be a relationship with your family, your friends, whether it be a work environment. This really simple system ultimately underpins how we navigate friendships, relationships, and any particular situation that we might be in. So if you aren't in tune with what you expect, how you expect to be treated, how you expect to be spoken to, what your personal boundaries are, we find ourselves, I guess, in predicaments where we get tested, run down, we have breakdowns in relationships, we have breakdowns within ourselves. We end up giving over our power, I guess, to other people, situations, because we haven't established the right, healthy boundaries for ourselves. By understanding what your boundaries are, you allow a space for you to grow as a person. You allow space for vulnerability. You allow space to navigate yourself, to get to know yourself better, to understand other people, because you create an environment where there's no misunderstanding of where you stand. If there is a lack of boundaries in a relationship, what do you think that looks like? Personally, I have been in relationships where there isn't boundaries set, and eventually it looks like one person giving themselves over while the other person takes. That's me personally. I end up being the person that gives and gives and gives and gives and gives to the point where I am no longer getting anything in return. I have had this cycle of relationships in my lifetime for a long time. And I believe that it truly comes down to not understanding what I needed to do for me. It's not understanding myself. It came back to not really understanding what I needed. It came back to not understanding what my worth was, not believing that my worth was more than what I was seeing it as, believing that other people were worthy, more worthy of me than I was. So this particular subject matter is so important. It is fundamental to understanding your authentic self. It is fundamental to your growth as a person, and it's fundamental to a lot of the relationships that you navigate in your lifetime. To break this down just a little bit more, if I'm not already making any sense, the boundary situation or an example of a boundary is it could be as simple as this. Say you you're in a relationship. You love each other, you know everything about each other, you live together, you're practically married, right? There is still room for self-boundaries. There's still room to have your own independence within each other, within yourself as a couple. There is still room to grow as individuals, to do your own thing, to have your own friendships. There is still room for you to have your own life, but come together and live life together. In some situations when you don't really know yourself, or you don't really know who you are, or you haven't had the time to discover that, you tend to morph together. You tend to live every day together. You tend to do everything together. You don't really have your own individual life outside of each other. And that is an example of some unhealthy boundaries where there's no room to grow. There's no room to understand who you are as a person individually. There is no room to make mistakes as an individual for oneself, right? And if you do, or if you break away from that mold of always doing things together, always being together, it can create things like insecurity. It can create things like self-doubt. It can create things like, it can create all these things and emotions within you that you didn't know you had because you hadn't done the work on you to set those boundaries where it is okay. It is okay for you to be an individual outside of me. It's okay for you to have a life outside of the life we have together in respect. By setting those boundaries as an individual and respecting them, you can then set boundaries as a couple and respect them within your relationship. Whether it be communicating on what your expectations are. I expect you to go out with your friends, absolutely. But you need to tell me what time you think you'd be home so that I have an understanding of when to expect you home, so I'm not sitting up worried about you if you don't come home until like 5 a.m. in the morning. Some people might say that's trapping me. I feel trapped. I feel like that's too much to ask, right? That there is a trigger. That person is unhealed. That person has got issues with being transparent and open and being somewhat accountable to another person out of respect. These are where boundaries come into play with self-worth, what you're willing to accept, what you're willing to accept from another person, for yourself, for them. It's fundamental. Another example of setting boundaries as an individual, as a single person, we go out and we date people. I'm a single female or single male, goes out, gets on Tinder, goes on Bumble, whatever thing that you choose. You may just go speed dating. If you haven't got an understanding of what your own personal boundaries are and what you're willing to accept for you or what you're willing to accept from these situations, you can find yourself in really sticky situations. I believe that, we go through life and we learn about ourselves. We learn about what we're willing to accept, what we're willing to give over, how we're going to navigate these transitions in life, whether it be a new relationship or being single or being a new parent or being in marriage, or whether it be, having a friendship group or having, a best friend all of a sudden, all these different elements of life. And we get to know ourselves, and in those relationships or in those transactions or in those situations where we're navigating a new situation, we learn something about what we're willing or not willing to do. But it fundamentally comes down to understanding yourself, what you're willing to accept, your self-worth. And if you don't, and you haven't done that work on yourself first, you find yourself in situations where you'll accept less than what you deserve. You find yourself in situations where you can push people away. You find yourself in situations where you're no longer setting boundaries, but you're setting up walls and blockages. That you're now triggered and you're scared. And in some instances, without the boundaries, those triggers or the things that have hurt you or the things that you have allowed in become your cycle. They become the thing that is most familiar to you. Oh, I'm aware. Oh, I remember feeling like this. This is where I feel most comfortable because it's most familiar to me. And we start to accept things that aren't good, that aren't healthy for us, that aren't for us, right? So in discovering yourself, in discovering who you are, your authentic version of you, speaking your truth, navigating through the dark, the light, navigating through connections, navigating the being vulnerable and letting go, unpacking your life's backpack, understanding what even is your truth. You also discover what your boundaries are, what you're willing to accept for you, what you're willing to give to other people, how much you're willing to give. And that doesn't mean that you're an asshole. It doesn't mean that you're not open. It just means that trust is built. It's earned. It happens over time. It's about respecting your own person more than what you do the other person, and not giving yourself over so freely, but creating these boundaries, creating these healthy boundaries that allows people to see you, get to know you, but not take from you to the point where you have nothing left to give. Now, this is a big topic. This is a big subject. My challenge to you is to sit down and reflect on how maybe you could improve some of the personal boundaries that you need in your life, whether it be with your partners, whether it be with your friends, whether it be with your family members, so that you have space to grow as a person, to get to know you, to shift and mold and change, to be vulnerable. My challenge is to get to know your boundaries, get to know your worth, get to know what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're not willing to sacrifice, and work within that and start communicating what that is for you. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this helps. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube page. Don't forget to listen to me on Spotify. I have Facebook on Frank and F.O.E. I have frankandfo.com. Hit me up on anything. You can comment, you can send me emails, subscribe to my blog. Happy to take any questions. I really appreciate your time. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.